I'm an immortal, and I'm scared for my life. Hi everyone, my name's Jake, and I'm an immortal. I suspect that you might be too. Not you in particular, dear reader. I'm not psychic, and I've got no idea who is going to read this. I mean you, in its most general sense. It's quite possible that all of humanity is immortal, but I have no way of testing that, strange as it may sound. It's possible I'm the only one, or I might just be the only one who's aware of my own immortality. If that's the case, and you are immortal, you have my deepest sympathies. I'll start from the beginning, shall I? I'm told it's a very good place to start, after all. I haven't always known I was immortal. I only found out in my early adulthood, but I forgot for almost a decade. I first figured it out, though, on my way to university one day. I was running late for a particularly grueling economics class, and I was in a hurry. To make a long story short, I didn't look both ways before crossing the street, and I was nailed by a big, black SUV. The pain didn't set in at first. I didn't even know what happened. One minute I was running across the street, and the next, I was face down on the asphalt. I thought for a brief moment that I must have tripped. When I tried to get up, though, my legs wouldn't support me. Then, when I tried to mutter a bewildered, "What?" blood began pouring out of my mouth, and I found I couldn't even breathe in. Then the pain came along. Slowly at first, a dull throbbing in my legs and chest, then rapidly growing in intensity and spreading to every inch of my body. A few seconds passed that felt like hours before I was face down on the road again, trying to scream but unable to do so. Then, unable to breathe, my head began to swim, and a few moments later I lost consciousness. I woke up in a tunnel, as cliched as that may sound, the most impossible tunnel. I could walk again, feeling no pain, and I found that I wasn't starved for oxygen anymore. In fact, it felt like I didn't need to breathe at all, though I quickly decided it wasn't wise to test this hypothesis. That wasn't what made the tunnel impossible, though. The laws of reality simply didn't apply here. Not the laws I was familiar with, anyway. Gravity, for example, was always perfectly aligned with the ground, and even when I climbed up on what appeared to be a hill from a distance, the floor felt perfectly level once I reached it. I think I only went a few hundred feet that time. The tunnel was poorly illuminated, the only lights being brief, randomly appearing flashes of green and white that flickered in and out within a fraction of a second. Eventually, I had to use my phone for light. Somehow, wherever I was, I still had it. At the end of the tunnel was, you guessed it, a light. When I entered it, I awoke in a hospital bed with some of my friends from university at my side. I had a vague recollection of what had just happened, but it was like trying to remember a dream, one that faded more quickly with each passing moment. As it turns out, I'd been unconscious for over a day and had suffered extensive injuries. The doctors told me that they expected a full recovery, albeit a very slow one. So that was the first time I died. By the time I left the hospital, I'd entirely forgotten. I'll spare you the details of my next couple of deaths. There's nothing particularly fascinating in them that you haven't already heard, and I forgot my experiences just as quickly. To summarize, I drowned in a boating accident, got a blood infection from an untreated cut I got while camping, and I even got electrocuted by an uninsulated live wire at a construction site. By the way, that's a nasty way to go. Quick, but thoroughly unpleasant. And each time, I woke up in a hospital bed with no recollection of my time in the impossible tunnel. My fifth death, though, was different. A mugging gone wrong left the police pressing me for details day after day. Each time I tried to remember what happened, a little bit more of the puzzle fell into place. First, the gun pointed at my chest. Then it was him firing the gun at me. Then the people running and screaming, trying to figure out where the gunshot came from. Finally, the tunnel. And with that single memory, a flood of unrelated memories came rushing back. Every time I had died in the past and been sent back to the tunnel, it was all there, etched in my brain as though with a chisel. It was then that I knew, truly knew, that I was immortal. So I did what any newfound immortal would. I had fun. I wasn't an idiot, of course. I knew that immortality or no, I wasn't indestructible. My injuries would last, so presumably if I became paralyzed, that wouldn't be fixed in my next life. Similarly, I'd be stuck with HIV or cancer if I ever caught them. So in many ways, I became more cautious. Risking a few years of your inevitably ending life is one thing, but risking eternity as a quadriplegic? That's something else entirely. I did a lot of traditionally risky things that many other people are scared of, though. Swimming with the sharks and deep sea diving, for example. Skydiving, of course, and a whole host of related activities. And when I died, I simply used it as an opportunity to explore the impossible tunnel further. The first thing that became obvious was that the tunnel was becoming longer. Every time I died, whether it had been a day or a year since my last death, the tunnel took a couple minutes longer than the last time to go through. It occurred to me that this may become tedious in the future if I had to spend hours or days crawling through a tunnel to get back to my life. Still, if there's one thing immortals have lots of, it's time, right? The next thing I noticed was how wrong all the geometry was. There were times I was sure, I was absolutely certain, that the tunnel went back and crossed over itself. But there was no trace of where I'd come through before. One particularly egregious time, I walked in a tight circle for almost 5 minutes straight, as though on a spiral staircase that someone had flattened. I made dozens of circles without finding an exit, or even the entrance, when it suddenly appeared in front of me, clear as day. Finally, the way I interacted with the world seemed to be based solely on how I believed I should interact with it. One time, when I realized that I wasn't in my real body and thus shouldn't have my phone, it simply vanished from my hand. It took me a few deaths to work out what was happening, and even longer to condition my brain into believing whatever I wanted it to believe. But in the end, I could do pretty much anything I wanted. The experience was similar to lucid dreaming. Things worked more or less, however, I felt they should, which made it very easy for things to stay the same, but rather more difficult to change on a whim. After that, rather than walk down the tunnel, I allowed myself to be gently carried on a slow, invisible river that flowed along the tunnel, or so I imagined. If I was in a hurry to speed things along, I would instead fly along at breakneck speed, arriving in scarcely any time at all. Of course, I also wanted to find out why I kept coming back to life through the tunnel. I've never been one to look a gift horse in the mouth, but there are some things you can't leave well enough alone. It took me no more than a week to find what I now believe to be the answer. Quantum immortality, they call it. Now, some of you have likely heard of this theory. And anyone who's honestly familiar with quantum mechanics is likely rolling their eyes. I get it, believe me. The amount of faux intellectual, quasi philosophical bull that has been passed off as being quantum something or other is simply astounding. But just bear with me, because whether it's aptly named or not, it seems to be what I'm going through. At its most fundamental level, quantum immortality is an offshoot of the many worlds theory. For anyone who hasn't seen a sci-fi movie in their entire life, the many worlds theory is that any time something happens randomly, all outcomes happen, and reality splits into a number of versions where each possibility plays out. In one reality, you might go straight to work. In another, you play hooky. In a third, you try to go to work, but get into a car accident and go to the hospital. You get the idea. Now, of course, there isn't any evidence that this actually takes place. It's mostly the realm of science fiction. Parallel dimensions is often what they're called. Quantum immortality takes this one step further. You see, it holds that a person's consciousness can't be destroyed. Anytime you die, the person who dies is simply an empty shell, and your consciousness moves on to another reality where you survived. You never experience your own death, but everyone around you can die at any time. They'll just pop into another reality where you can't follow them. The only difference is that, rather than a new reality being created each time I die, I seem to head into pre-existing reality, which frankly is a little bit troubling. First, because it suggests that these realities were already established, and as such are already different from my own. Indeed, I've noticed an increasing number of anomalies as I've died more and more often. My house changes subtly. Friends who got laser eye surgery are wearing glasses again, that sort of thing. Second, though, and a bit more disturbing, is the question of what happens to the version of me that already existed here. Do we merge? Or does something else happen? It's a question for a philosopher, I suppose, and it doesn't seem to matter. After all, there's been a far more disturbing development in the last few deaths I've had. And this, more than anything else, is why I've bothered to write all this down. It all began 4 months ago, and yes, I'd gotten up to a death every month or so. Maybe it's a bit risky, but you can only die so many times before you stop getting worried. Anyway, I was traveling down the tunnel, floating on my back as usual. Recently, I'd discovered the trick of playing music to listen to on my trip, so I was enjoying some smooth jazz on my imaginary lazy river cruise. Suddenly, though, I heard a scraping behind me. Now, this alone was enough to freak me out. Of all the times I'd been through there, dozens, if not hundreds, I had never encountered anything that moved or made a sound. No rocks falling, no water dripping, and certainly nothing alive, or between lives, in there with me. When I opened my eyes, though, I saw something even more disturbing. I wasn't going anywhere. I could feel myself being carried away on my imaginary current, but I wasn't moving, even an inch down the tunnel. It was like being in a dream where you're running but still stuck in place. The scraping was getting louder now, and it sounded for all the world like claws dragging against the stone floor. When I realized the river wasn't carrying me anywhere, I stopped believing in it, and I hit the floor with a sharp jolt. I knew I had to get out of there, somehow. I knew that if I could make it to the light and back into my body, I'd be safe. So I pulled myself along, dragging myself on hands and knees down the tunnel. Again, I could feel myself moving foot by foot, but the tunnel walls only showed inches passing by. I don't know how long I scrambled along like that, clawing my way to safety through an impossible tunnel, but I made it. Back in the familiar hospital bed, the doctor's telling me again how lucky I am to be alive. For the first time, they were right. And every time since then, it's gotten worse. I've learned to fight whatever it is through intense focus, managing to increase my speed despite its nightmarish influence. But every time I go through the tunnel, it gets longer. Eventually, whatever that thing is, it'll catch up to me. Fighting it is exhausting work, and before long, the tunnel will be too long for me to focus the entire time. I'll slip, and it's going to catch me. And I don't know what'll happen then. Last time, it began tilting the tunnel backwards, making the world that had always been level before tip into its maw as though the thing were drinking me out of a glass. As it drew near, I lost all feeling in my legs and I could feel a cold gust of air, almost like a breath, blow against me. I don't know how close it got to me, but it wasn't far. Next time, maybe the time after, it'll catch me. It's just a matter of time. I'm an immortal, and I'm scared for my life. Last night was the worst sleep paralysis episode I've ever had. I'm 21 years old, and I've been enduring these episodes for the past 3 years non-stop. At one point, I was getting it every night, and as a result, I would purposely stay up in order to not go through it again, which resulted in me being diagnosed with insomnia. The most days I've gone without sleep is 3 days, all because I was terrified of going through the paralysis again and again. Last night, before I went to sleep, something felt strange and off. I believe in the paranormal, and I've had crazy amounts of experiences all throughout my life, so as I was going to bed, I told myself I wouldn't be surprised if I went through an episode that night. Now, since I go through this way too many times, I sleep with a strong flashlight on and never sleep on my back. As I kept drifting into sleep, I had a strange and eerie dream. I was sleeping in my room, but I could see people I knew sitting at the foot of my bed, just staring at me. There was someone from high school that also just sat there, but instead of staring, they were taking pictures of me fast asleep. I was sleeping on my side, and I started hearing a really loud buzz and a clock ticking really loudly, which terrified me because I don't have a clock in my room, nor anything that buzzes. I opened my eyes for just a second and realized something was off. I was stuck, and I started to panic because usually I can try to move a finger or two to help with waking up, but this time, I couldn't move at all. I shut my eyes as quick as I could, and a few seconds later, the ticking clock started getting louder, and suddenly, I felt something lay down next to me. I teared up. What's happening? Why does this feel so real? Why can't I move a finger or toe? Who's next to me? I tried calling out for my dad, but of course, nothing came out. Usually when I attempt to call for someone, I can get a small peep out of me, but this time, again, I was completely stuck. Suddenly, whatever was laying next to me started caressing my hair, and its hand was going down my face to my collarbones. It felt so real. I was shocked and absolutely terrified. Now, some quick backstory. My sleep paralysis episodes were always the same. It's always just a silhouette that enters my room and gets closer and closer to me each time, but I can never see its face. The last time this happened, it was standing right in front of me next to my bed, and I managed to wake up. After it was done touching my hair and face, it put its arms around me as if it were trying to cuddle me and make me the little spoon. I tried getting out of its arms, but I couldn't. And when I heard it chuckle, I froze. Mario? Mario is my boyfriend's name, and when it chuckled, it sounded exactly like him. Mario, what are you doing? It responded.
I'm trying to hold you. What are you doing? Why do you keep moving? Don't you want me to hold you? You love when I hold you.
It wouldn't let me go. I was scared. Never has it spoken. Never has it touched me. I kept trying to shake and get out of its arms, and it pulled me on top of him. My back was on its stomach, and I could feel Mario's beard on the side of my face.
It's me. I swear.
It pulled my hand and made me touch its hair. Mario has really curly hair, and he styles it in such a specific way. I knew right away as I felt it that yes, it was his hair. Mario, please, you're hurting me.
No, I'm not. Stop being such a drama queen.
Of course, I already knew this wasn't actually him. But him calling me a drama queen and denying he was hurting me made me believe it even more. Even when the real Mario and I play wrestle, if I tell him he's hurting me, he backs off and apologizes profusely. The thing set me back down on my side, and I opened my eyes just a bit and swallowed a shriek when I saw my little brother standing next to my bed. He didn't say anything, just stared. At this point, I was bawling, and my brother and I are super close, so I would never dream of doing this for real. But I panicked. I didn't know what to do. This was the longest episode I had ever had. I managed to find some strength, and I shoved my hand into my brother's mouth for some reason and tried hurting it somehow inside of the mouth. I didn't know what I was doing. I was desperate. After a few seconds of pulling his teeth, he started going down. And while he went down, the arm started letting go. I was no longer being held aggressively. Before Mario left, he whispered into my ear,
What the fuck? Why is the clock so damn loud?
and boom, everything stopped. I laid there on my side. I was crying. I could still feel the tears coming down the side of my face. It was 3:30 a.m. I turned on the room light and put on a soothing song and waited for 4 a.m. to fall back asleep. The next morning, my dad came into my room to probably check why my light was on. I woke up and told him everything.
That's weird.
He said,
I also woke up at 3:30 last night. I felt someone was staring at me, and when I grabbed a flashlight, I saw you standing at the foot of my bed, just smiling at me.
never has the silhouette done something like this. I never thought it would go that far. But this thing created itself into two of the people that mean the most in my life to me. Part of me doesn't think that it was the silhouette. Part of me thinks it was a demon, disguising itself into people I love dearly. I don't know. I'm scared. I'm not gonna sleep tonight.